The sky above Earth was a chaotic mixture of fire and smoke. A distant, glowing object fell from the heavens, streaking across the sky in a blaze of brilliance. The object was a spaceship, its hull badly damaged, and its engines spluttering as it tried to break through Earth's atmosphere. Inside, Lyra, a young alien girl, struggled to regain control of the ship. Her high-tech exoskeleton, once a symbol of her strength, had been torn apart during the flight, and now she was fighting to stay conscious. Her breath was shallow and uneven, pain coursing through every part of her body. Her heart raced with fear as the ship began its final descent. She had no control. The ship was spinning out of control, plummeting toward the unknown planet below. Lyra could feel the heat of the atmosphere burning through the fragile hull, and she knew that the end was near. She couldn't save herself. She could only hope that somehow someone would help her before it was too late. The communication device on her wrist crackled, broken and barely functioning. She could still hear the faint signal of distress, but the response was nothing more than static. Her fingers trembled as she attempted to send out another signal, desperately hoping for any kind of response. Her people, the ones she had called her own, had abandoned her when they realized she was no longer useful. She was broken, disabled, and they had left her behind without hesitation. The planet below, Earth, seemed like a place of opportunity. At least it seemed that way before everything had gone wrong. She had been sent to scout this world, but instead it had become her prison. The ship shuddered violently as the last of the engines sputtered, and a deafening crash, followed by a burst of sparks, filled the air as the ship slammed into the rugged landscape. Lyra was thrown against the interior walls, her vision blurring. She could hear the screeching of metal as the ship tore apart, and then everything went black. When Lyra regained consciousness, the world around her was spinning. The pain in her body was unbearable, but she gritted her teeth and forced herself to sit up. Her surroundings were strange, an alien world full of strange sounds and unsettling silence. The sky above was still dark, the atmosphere thick with smoke and the lingering scent of burning metal. Her exoskeleton was barely functional, and she could hardly stand, let alone fight. Her thoughts were a blur, and all she wanted was to escape the pain, to find safety. But deep inside, she knew that if she didn't act now, she would not survive. The communication device on her wrist crackled once more, a faint and broken signal reaching out to the world. But the signal was weak, and no one responded. There was no one to help her. No one, except for the alien forces that had been chasing her relentlessly. They had tracked her ship's descent, and now they were drawing closer. Lyra could hear the sounds of ships in the distance, growing louder with each passing moment. She needed to hide, to find a place where she could make her stand. But the only thing she could do was move, to crawl forward and hope for the best. The cold grip of panic started to take hold of her, but then something unexpected happened. Out of the corner of her eye, Lyra saw a figure approaching, a human soldier, a man who appeared to be just another part of this strange world. He was tall, with strong features and an expression of focus, as though he was on a mission. The soldier's eyes met hers, and for a moment, everything seemed to freeze. The soldier's name was Jack. He had been on a mission with his team, patrolling the outskirts of a military base. His mind had been focused on his duties, the mission ahead, until he saw something that made his heart skip a beat. A figure, an alien girl, struggling against the wreckage of a destroyed ship. He had been trained for combat, for war, but nothing could prepare him for this moment. A disabled alien, clearly in pain. All alone, and worse, being hunted. Jack had been told countless times that aliens were dangerous, that Earth's people were far from prepared for a galactic war. The galaxy viewed humans as primitive, weak even. But Jack was different. He had learned to trust his instincts. And now his instincts screamed at him to act. He couldn't just leave her to die, not when he had the chance to help. He knew it would be dangerous, that his actions could put his life at risk. But the thought of leaving an innocent being to be slaughtered was even more unbearable. Jack didn't hesitate. He sprinted toward the wreckage, his boots crunching the dirt beneath him. The air around him crackled with tension as the sound of alien ships drew closer. Time was running out, and Jack knew that if he didn't act quickly, they would both be dead. As he reached Lyra, he didn't speak, didn't try to ask questions. Instead, he simply extended a hand to her, offering her a chance, a moment of salvation in an otherwise hopeless situation. Lyra's eyes flickered with confusion as she looked at the human. She was in no state to trust anyone, especially not a human. But there was something in his eyes, a sincerity that caught her off guard. She hesitated for a moment before reaching out and grabbing his hand. The pain in her body intensified with the movement, but she pushed it aside. For the first time since the crash, she had a chance to survive. With Jack's help, she might just make it out alive. Jack helped her to her feet, his grip firm but gentle. He could feel her tremble in his arms, but there was no time to comfort her. The alien ships were almost upon them, and he needed to get them both to safety. He scanned the area, looking for a place to hide. There was a forest not far off, dense trees and thick underbrush. It would provide the perfect cover, but getting there would be a challenge. As he looked around, he saw movement in the distance. The alien forces had arrived. They were descending in sleek, menacing ships, their technology far beyond anything Earth had seen. Jack knew that even with his training, he would be outmatched, but he wasn't going to let that stop him. He had a mission, and now it was no longer about the enemy. It was about saving Lyra, and maybe, just maybe, finding a way to survive long enough to fight back. The sound of alien ships filled the air, and Jack's heart raced. He turned to Lyra, whose eyes were wide with fear. He could see her struggling to stay on her feet, her exoskeleton malfunctioning, but she still held on to him. Jack knew she couldn't fight back. Not yet. It was up to him to protect her, to keep her safe. With a deep breath, Jack helped Lyra toward the forest, the alien ships in pursuit. He didn't know how they were going to escape, but he knew one thing for sure. He wasn't going to leave her behind. As they moved into the trees, the tension reached its peak. The alien forces were closing in. Jack's pulse quickened, but he refused to give in to fear. He had faced death many times before, but this was different. This wasn't just about surviving. It was about protecting the life of someone who couldn't protect herself. And that was something worth fighting for. The forest was dense, and the sounds of the alien ships grew fainter as they moved deeper into the cover of the trees. Jack felt a small sense of relief, but the battle was far from over. The enemy was relentless, and they wouldn't stop until they had captured or killed Lyra. But Jack was determined. He wasn't about to let that happen. He glanced at Lyra, who was still struggling, but her grip on his arm had tightened. She was trying to fight through the pain, through the weakness that threatened to overcome her. Jack knew that she wasn't just some alien. It was clear she was someone who had her own strength, even if she didn't realize it yet. As they moved deeper into the forest, Jack couldn't help but wonder about the girl beside him. Who was she? Why was she here? What had happened to her people? And most importantly, what was going to happen next? For now, he didn't have the answers. All he knew was that they were in this together. And whatever happened, he would do everything in his power to protect her. He had no idea where this journey would take them, but one thing was certain. Their lives were now intertwined, and there was no turning back. The tension remained thick, the danger still close. But for the first time since the crash, Jack allowed himself a brief moment of hope. They had survived the worst part, but the battle was far from over. And the story of their survival had just begun. The forest around them was silent, but the stillness only made the danger feel more imminent. Jack and Lyra were moving quickly through the dense trees, trying to escape the alien forces that were closing in fast. The weight of their situation wasn't lost on Jack. He knew that the aliens were relentless, and far more technologically advanced than anything Earth had, but he couldn't just leave Lyra behind. Not after everything she had already been through. As they moved deeper into the forest, Jack's mind raced. He was trained for combat, but he had never faced anything like this before. Lyra, this strange, beautiful alien girl, had crash-landed on Earth and was now being hunted by her own kind. And yet, despite the incredible odds, Jack knew he couldn't walk away. The decision had already been made, and there was no turning back. His instincts told him that he couldn't just hide. He needed to fight back, to protect her. Jack was used to fighting for his life. But this was different. This wasn't just about survival. It was about saving someone who had no one else. He had seen his fair share of danger, but this felt personal. He glanced at Lyra, who was stumbling behind him, her exoskeleton malfunctioning with each step she took. Her face was pale, sweat glistening on her forehead. Jack knew she was in pain. He could see the exhaustion in her eyes. But she wasn't complaining. She was pushing through, just like he was. Jack was no stranger to pain himself. The countless battles he had fought in, the wounds he had sustained, they were nothing compared to what Lyra was going through. And yet she was still moving forward, still fighting to stay alive. There was something about her resilience, something that made Jack want to protect her even more. The alien forces were closing in, and Jack knew they couldn't outrun them. The sound of their ships grew louder, echoing through the trees, and Jack's pulse quickened. He could feel the weight of the situation pressing down on him, but there was no time to waste. They had to find shelter, a place to hide, and fast. Jack activated his stealth technology, a sleek suit that blended seamlessly with the environment around him. It was his last line of defense, and he knew it would only buy them some time. The advanced technology was one of Earth's best-kept secrets, and it was Jack's greatest advantage in this fight. He motioned for Lyra to stay close, then led her to a small cave hidden deep in the forest. The entrance was nearly invisible, a small gap between the rocks covered by vines and foliage. As they entered the cave, Jack breathed a sigh of relief. For a moment, they were hidden, but he knew it wouldn't last long. The alien forces were too smart. They would find them eventually. Still, it was a temporary reprieve, and he used the time to assess their options. Lyra collapsed against the wall of the cave, her breath ragged, her body shaking. Jack's heart ached at the sight of her. She was so small, so fragile, yet she had fought with everything she had to survive. He knelt beside her, reaching for his medical kit. It wasn't much, but it was all he had. Lyra looked at him, her eyes wide with fear and gratitude. She wanted to speak, but her voice was barely a whisper. Jack could see the pain in her eyes, the weight of her own thoughts pressing down on her. She had been through so much, and now here she was, depending on him. It was a responsibility Jack hadn't expected, but it was one he had accepted without hesitation. "You're safe for now," Jack said quietly, trying to reassure her. "But we need to keep moving." Lyra nodded weakly, but Jack could see the uncertainty in her eyes. She wasn't sure if they could escape the alien forces. Neither was he. But there was something inside of him, something that told him they couldn't give up now. Not when they had come so far. As Jack began to treat her injuries, he couldn't help but wonder about her story. Why was she here? Why had her people abandoned her? What had happened to make her crash land on Earth, injured and alone? There were so many questions, but Jack didn't have the answers. All he knew was that he couldn't leave her to face this danger alone. Once Lyra's wounds were tended to as best as he could manage, Jack knew they couldn't stay in the cave for long. The aliens were closing in, and they wouldn't rest until they found her. He checked his weapon, then turned to Lyra. "We need to get moving," Jack said, his voice low but firm. "Stay close, and don't make a sound. If they find us, we're done." Lyra nodded, but her fear was palpable. She had never been in a situation like this before. Her people were powerful, technologically advanced, but they had left her behind. And now she was at the mercy of an unknown human soldier. Jack understood her fear. He could feel it too, the weight of the unknown pressing on him. But he couldn't let her see his own doubt. He had to be strong, for both of them. As they moved deeper into the forest, the sounds of the alien ships grew louder. Jack knew they had to be getting close. The air was thick with tension as they carefully made their way through the trees, using the cover of night to hide their movements. Every rustle in the leaves, every snap of a twig, made Jack's heart race. The aliens were out there, searching for them. He had to be quick, strategic, and most of all, calm. But as they moved, the sound of the ships grew louder, and Jack's sense of urgency increased. He knew they didn't have much time. The alien forces had already tracked them once, and Jack wasn't sure how long his stealth technology would keep them hidden. The aliens were smart, and they had the advantage of numbers. If they were going to make it out alive, they needed a plan, and fast. Jack's mind raced as he considered their options. They couldn't outrun the aliens, and they couldn't hide forever. There was only one choice left. He would have to fight. He had to make a stand, to protect Lyra at all costs. Turning to her, Jack spoke quickly. "Lyra, I need you to stay here and stay hidden. I'm going to create a diversion, draw them away from you." Lyra's eyes widened with fear. "No, you can't do that. You'll get yourself killed." "I'll be fine," Jack said, forcing a smile. "But you need to stay hidden. Don't come out until it's safe." Lyra hesitated, then nodded. "Be careful." With one last look at her, Jack turned and headed toward the clearing. He could hear the ships closing in, their engines roaring as they moved through the trees. The time to act had come. Jack activated his weapon, a high-tech energy rifle that could cut through metal with ease. His heart was pounding, but he knew this was the only way to give them a chance. He wasn't going to let Lyra down. As he stepped into the clearing, the alien ships appeared, their sleek forms cutting through the trees like shadows. Jack raised his weapon, aiming at the closest ship. He couldn't let them find Lyra. He had to be quick, be precise. And then, with a roar of energy, Jack fired. The battle for their survival had just begun. The night was their only ally as Jack and Lyra raced through the forest. The alien forces had been closing in, their ships hovering ominously above, but Jack wasn't going to let them catch up. Not now, not after everything they had been through. He knew the gravity of the situation. If the aliens found them, it was over. So Jack kept his focus sharp, pushing forward with everything he had. The mission was clear: keep Lyra safe, no matter the cost. The trees blurred past them as Jack's vehicle, a sleek, high-tech military transport, sped through the underbrush. Its design was almost invisible to the naked eye, its dark color and advanced cloaking technology, making it blend seamlessly with the surroundings. If anyone could get them out of this alive, it was Jack. But he wasn't fooling himself. This wasn't going to be easy. The aliens were smart. They had been tracking them for hours, and Jack could feel the weight of their relentless pursuit pressing in on them. Lyra, her face pale and sweat-drenched, sat next to Jack in the vehicle. She had remained quiet for the most part, her eyes focused on the screens in front of her as she connected with the ship's AI system. But Jack could see the tension in her posture. The alien forces weren't just chasing them. They were hunting her. Lyra's story was still a mystery to Jack, but one thing was clear. Her people had abandoned her. She had been left behind on Earth, forced to fend for herself, and now she was paying the price. Jack's hands tightened on the controls. He was used to high-stakes missions, but this was different. This wasn't just a battle for survival. This was personal. Lyra wasn't just another mission to him. He had seen the pain in her eyes, the desperation. It mirrored something deep inside him, a feeling he had buried long ago. Lyra's voice broke the silence. "Thank you, Jack," she said, her tone soft but filled with emotion. "You didn't have to help me. I didn't expect anyone to." Jack glanced over at her, his heart tightening. "I couldn't just leave you behind," he replied, his voice low but sincere. "You've been through enough. I won't let them take you." Her eyes softened, and for a moment, Jack could see the gratitude shining through the fear. But there was more there, something deeper. He could sense it, the weight of her past. It wasn't just the alien forces she was running from. It was something else, something that had left a scar on her soul. "I was sent to Earth to scout," Lyra continued, her voice trembling slightly. "But when I arrived, things went wrong. My people, they betrayed me. They left me behind. I wasn't supposed to end up here. I didn't ask for this." Jack's grip on the wheel tightened as he processed her words. Betrayal. It was a theme he knew all too well. He had lost everything once, everything that mattered to him. His family, his home. The memories were still sharp in his mind. He had been left alone in a world that didn't care, much like Lyra. And now, here they were, two broken souls fighting for survival in a world that didn't want them. "I get it," Jack said quietly, his voice almost a whisper. "I've been where you are. I lost my family, everything I had. But you're not alone anymore. I'm here, and I'm going to make sure you get out of this." Lyra didn't respond immediately, but Jack could feel the shift in the air between them. The unspoken bond that had begun to form between them was palpable. It wasn't just about survival anymore. They were in this together, two strangers connected by their pain, their loss, and now their fight for survival. The sound of alien ships suddenly filled the air, their engines roaring like predators in pursuit. Jack's heart skipped a beat. He glanced at the monitors and saw the red blips of the alien ships closing in. The cloaking device wasn't going to hold much longer. They needed to make it to the hidden base, a secret military outpost deep in the mountains. It was their only chance. "Hold on," Jack said, his voice steady. He slammed his foot on the accelerator, and the vehicle surged forward, weaving expertly through the trees. The cloaking device shimmered, distorting the surroundings as they moved at breakneck speed. But Jack knew it wouldn't be enough to shake the alien ships for long. The technology on their side was too advanced. Lyra's fingers moved quickly over the holographic interface, activating the ship's weapons system. She didn't have to speak. Jack knew what she was doing. She was using her alien tech to give them an edge. Together, they were a formidable team. The vehicle bounced over uneven terrain, and Jack gritted his teeth as he focused on the road ahead. He couldn't afford to make a mistake. The alien ships were close now, their sensors scanning the area. One wrong move, and they'd be exposed. Suddenly, the vehicle's alarms went off, a shrill sound filling the air. Jack's eyes flicked to the radar, and his heart raced as he saw a red blip moving directly toward them. One of the alien ships had found them. "Get ready," Jack muttered, his hand tightening on the controls. He activated the weapons system and slammed a button, launching a burst of energy towards the incoming ship. The explosion was deafening, sending a shockwave through the trees. The alien ship faltered, but it wasn't enough to stop them. They were still being chased. Lyra's voice was calm but urgent. "We have to go faster, Jack. They're not going to stop. We need to get to the base. Now." Jack's jaw clenched as he pushed the vehicle to its limits. The forest blurred around them as they sped toward the mountains. They could see the hidden base in the distance, nestled deep in the valley, but it felt like an eternity away. As they neared the base, Jack heard the roar of the alien ships behind them, growing louder. There wasn't time to lose. He could feel the pressure building in his chest as the vehicle sped through the trees, the base growing larger in his vision. The cloaking device flickered, barely holding together as the alien ships tried to lock onto their position. Lyra's hands flew over the controls, activating the last line of defense. "We can make it," she said, determination in her voice. "Just a little further." Jack didn't answer. He didn't need to. The base was so close now. With a final push, Jack surged forward, the vehicle barreling through the forest and into the safety of the base. The doors closed behind them, just as the alien ships entered the clearing, their weapons firing. But the moment the door to the base shut behind them, Jack let out a sigh of relief. They had made it, but something in the air felt off. The hum of the base's emergency lights, the slight tremor in the ground beneath their feet, and the unsettling silence told Jack that they weren't safe yet. The aliens had tracked them this far, and now they had to face the real danger. Inside the base, Jack quickly began securing their position. The high-tech walls around them were designed to protect, but Jack knew that even the best defenses could be compromised if the enemy was persistent enough. Lyra stood by his side, scanning the screens and monitoring the alien forces outside. Her face was tense, the pale light from the control panels casting a shadow across her features. "We're not alone, Jack," Lyra said, her voice low but filled with certainty. "They found us." Jack's heart skipped a beat. He had hoped they could catch a break, but deep down, he knew the alien forces wouldn't stop until they had her. The fight was far from over. Turning to Lyra, Jack's eyes met hers, a mix of determination and fear in both of them. "We've made it this far. We'll keep fighting, whatever it takes." Lyra nodded, but her eyes were haunted, as if she could see the vast army of alien soldiers closing in. She wasn't just afraid for herself. She was afraid for Jack, too. The burden of the mission, of being hunted, was more than just physical. It was emotional, and Lyra felt it in every fiber of her being. Suddenly, the ground shook. A loud boom echoed through the base. Jack gripped the wall, steadying himself as the vibration subsided. Lyra's fingers flew over the control panel, her eyes scanning the data. "They've breached the outer perimeter," she said, her voice filled with urgency. "They'll be here in minutes." Jack cursed under his breath. There was no time to waste. They had to prepare for battle. His military training kicked in, and he quickly assessed their options. The base wasn't equipped for a full-scale invasion, but it did have several secret weapons. He was familiar with the defense systems, and they were about to become their best friend. "We don't have much time," Jack said. "We'll have to fight our way out. I'll take point. You're with me." Lyra looked at him, her expression unreadable, but Jack could see the fear hidden beneath her calm facade. She had been running from the aliens for too long, and now the confrontation was inevitable. Jack knew the fight would be brutal, but they had no choice. As they moved deeper into the base, Jack's mind raced. The alien soldiers would have advanced technology, force fields, cloaking devices, and possibly even more deadly weapons. But Jack had something they didn't: human ingenuity. It had gotten him out of tight spots before, and it would have to work again. The base's corridors were narrow, the lights flickering as the security systems struggled to keep up with the oncoming assault. They moved swiftly, Jack leading the way with his weapons at the ready. Lyra was close behind, her alien technology adding an extra layer of firepower to their arsenal. "Stay close," Jack whispered, his voice low but steady. As they reached the main control room, the door slammed open with a violent force. Jack barely had time to react. A group of alien soldiers stormed in, their glowing eyes fixed on Jack and Lyra. They were tall, their armor sleek and deadly, with advanced weapons aimed directly at them. Jack didn't hesitate. He dove behind a nearby pillar, narrowly avoiding the first blast. His heart raced, but his mind was calm, calculating. He could hear the heavy footsteps of the alien soldiers as they approached, their weapons charging. Lyra didn't need instructions. She was already on the move, her hands weaving through the air as she activated the defense systems within the base. Sparks flew from the walls as energy barriers erupted, but the aliens were quick to adapt. One of them fired a blast, and Jack barely managed to dodge it. His muscles burned from the effort, but he knew he had to keep moving. In a split second, Jack saw his opening. One of the aliens was distracted, its attention focused on Lyra as she worked to hack into the control systems. Jack sprang into action, using his agility to close the distance between them. With a swift motion, He kicked the alien's weapon out of its hand and delivered a devastating punch to its side, sending it crashing into the wall. But there was no time to savor the victory. Another alien soldier charged at him, its glowing eyes narrowed in rage. Jack barely had time to draw his weapon before the soldier was upon him, its clawed hands reaching for his throat. Lyra's voice rang out just in time. "Jack, behind you." Jack twisted his body, narrowly avoiding the alien's attack. He spun around, using the momentum to land a powerful kick to the alien's chest. The creature staggered back, but it wasn't finished. It lunged at Jack again, but this time he was ready. He ducked and grabbed the alien's arm, twisting it behind its back and slamming it into the ground. Lyra was beside him now, her own weapon raised as she fired a burst of energy at another group of soldiers. The blast hit the wall, causing a massive explosion that sent debris flying in all directions. Jack grinned, impressed by her precision. She had come a long way since they first met, and now she was an essential part of their fight. The aliens were relentless, their numbers growing by the second. Jack and Lyra fought side by side, their movements fluid, almost synchronized. Each attack was calculated, every decision made in the heat of the moment. There was no room for mistakes, no room for hesitation. But amidst the chaos, Jack could hear Lyra's voice again, this time softer, more vulnerable. "Jack, if we don't make it out of this, I want you to know." Jack's heart skipped a beat, but he couldn't afford to let his emotions cloud his judgment. "Not now, Lyra. We'll talk later. Stay focused." But as he said those words, he knew the truth. They might not have a later. The enemy was closing in, their forces overwhelming the base, and the odds were stacked against them. The fight was more than just survival now. It was about sending a message. The humans weren't weak. They weren't just a race to be destroyed. They could fight back, and they would. Lyra's next words were barely audible, but Jack caught them. "I trust you, Jack. Thank you for everything." For a split second, the chaos around them faded, and all Jack could hear was her voice. He met her eyes, and for the first time since this nightmare had started, he allowed himself to believe that they could make it out alive. They had come this far together, and they weren't going to stop now. Suddenly, the doors at the far end of the room burst open, and a new wave of alien soldiers stormed in. The air was thick with tension as the two sides faced off, the final battle on the horizon. Jack and Lyra stood shoulder to shoulder, weapons raised, ready for whatever came next. This was it. There was no turning back. The battle had reached its boiling point. The air was thick with the smell of burnt metal and smoke. Explosions echoed in every corner of the base as alien soldiers clashed with Jack and Lyra's desperate defenses. Jack's heart pounded in his chest as the weight of the situation pressed down on him. There was no turning back now. They were in the final stages of the fight for their lives, and for humanity's survival. Lyra had been struggling, her body still weak from the crash, but something in her had shifted during the battle. The fear and pain that had once overwhelmed her were now replaced by a burning determination. She had always been capable, but now, with her advanced alien exoskeleton reactivated and her full strength returning, she was a force to be reckoned with. Her armor gleamed under the dim light, the sleek metal surfaces humming with power. With her exoskeleton fully operational, she was faster, stronger, and more deadly than ever before. As Lyra moved through the battlefield, her every step sent shockwaves through the enemy lines. She swung her energy sword with precision, cutting down alien soldiers with surgical strikes. Jack couldn't help but watch her in awe as she effortlessly took down enemy after enemy. For the first time, Lyra wasn't just the injured alien girl Jack had rescued. She was an unstoppable warrior fighting for survival and for the future of both her kind and humanity. She fought with a fierce determination that Jack knew all too well. She was no longer just a helpless target. She was his ally. And together, they were about to turn the tide of this war. As Lyra pressed forward, Jack fought with equal intensity. His training as a soldier had never been more useful. Every movement, every shot, every decision was executed with flawless precision. He was a force of nature on the battlefield, his agility and quick thinking putting him ahead of the alien forces. He ducked and weaved, avoiding energy blasts while returning fire with deadly accuracy. The alien soldiers were closing in, but Jack was relentless. He wasn't about to let Lyra down. Not now. Not after everything they'd been through. The battle raged on, and the odds were still against them. Alien ships bombarded the base from above, raining down fiery destruction. Jack and Lyra were forced to fight on two fronts, both on the ground and in the air. Orbital bombardment had turned the landscape into a war zone, with craters and explosions lighting up the night sky. But it was their teamwork that truly made a difference. Jack had the experience and the tactical knowledge, while Lyra brought advanced alien technology and immense strength to the table. Together, they were a deadly combination. When Jack moved in for a close-range strike, Lyra was right behind him, using her exoskeleton's strength to send enemies flying with a single blow. Jack covered her back, picking off aliens who tried to sneak up on them. Their synchronized movements, born of necessity and trust, were a sight to behold. They were two warriors, bound by a shared goal, fighting side by side against the forces of oppression. As the battle escalated, Jack and Lyra found themselves surrounded. The alien forces were closing in from all sides. The explosions from above had left the ground unstable, and the enemy's numbers seemed endless. For a moment, Jack thought they might have reached their breaking point. The base was in ruins, their defenses were nearly depleted, and the alien soldiers had them cornered. But then, something unexpected happened. The radio crackled to life. It was a voice Jack recognized. Bonner, one of his fellow soldiers. "Jack, we got your six," Bonner said, his voice steady despite the chaos. "We're here to back you up." Jack's heart leaped in his chest. He had almost forgotten that Bonner and the rest of the team had been stationed at a secondary position. They had been out of sight for the entire battle, but now they were ready to join the fight. Bonner's team arrived in full force, charging into the fray with weapons raised high. The reinforcements arrived just in time to push back the alien forces, creating a window of opportunity for Jack and Lyra to regroup. Jack exchanged a quick glance with Lyra, a silent promise passing between them. They were in this together. They were going to win this fight. But the moment was short-lived. Just as the reinforcements entered the battlefield, a new wave of enemy soldiers appeared, their weapons more advanced than anything Jack had ever seen. The alien forces had called in their elites, warriors clad in reinforced armor and armed with energy rifles capable of obliterating entire squads. The odds had shifted again, and now the human soldiers were on the defensive. The air was thick with tension as the battle reached its most intense point yet. Jack and Lyra fought back to back, but even their combined strength couldn't hold off the alien forces forever. They were overwhelmed. Lyra was barely keeping up with the relentless assault, her exoskeleton beginning to show signs of wear. Jack was losing ground, his energy dwindling with each passing second. Then, amidst the chaos, Jack heard a sharp shout. It was Bonner. "Jack, look out!" Before Jack could turn, he saw Bonner charge forward, his weapon raised in a last-ditch effort to save them. The elite alien soldiers had targeted Jack, and Bonner was sacrificing himself to protect his friend. In a split second, Bonner threw himself in front of Jack, taking the blast meant for him. Time seemed to slow as Jack watched his friend fall, a burst of energy tearing through his body. Bonner hit the ground hard, and Jack felt a pang of grief deep in his chest. Bonner had given his life for them, for the mission, for humanity's survival. Lyra's voice broke through the haze of grief. "Jack, we can't stop now. We have to finish this." Jack nodded, his emotions swirling as he fought to hold back tears. Bonner had given his life for this cause, and Jack wouldn't let it be in vain. He clenched his fists, his resolve harder than ever. For Bonner, he whispered under his breath. For humanity. With a renewed sense of purpose, Jack and Lyra charged back into the fight. The alien forces were caught off guard by their sudden surge of energy. With Lyra's exoskeleton in full power mode, and Jack at his peak, they tore through the alien lines, their weapons flashing in the dim light. Every strike, every shot, was a tribute to Bonner, a tribute to humanity's spirit. The tide had turned. Slowly but surely, the alien forces began to retreat. Their morale was shattered, their best soldiers falling one by one. The human resistance, fueled by the sacrifices of those like Bonner, was finally making its mark. The aliens had underestimated humanity's resolve. They had underestimated Jack and Lyra. As the last of the alien soldiers fell, Jack and Lyra stood victorious. They were battered, bruised, and exhausted, but they had won. Humanity had triumphed. The alien forces had been pushed back, and their invasion was over. Jack looked at Lyra, her face covered in dirt and sweat, but her eyes shining with triumph. They had done it. Against all odds, they had won. Together, they had proven that humanity was not to be underestimated. Bonner's sacrifice would never be forgotten, and their victory would resonate across the galaxy. Humanity had proven that they would fight, no matter the cost. And they had won. The dust of battle had settled. The chaos and destruction that had once filled the air with fear and tension were now replaced by an eerie silence. The base, which had been the center of the fierce fight, now lay in ruins, a testament to the struggle that had taken place. But amidst the devastation, there was a glimmer of hope. Humanity had emerged victorious. The alien forces, who had once threatened to conquer the Earth, had been pushed back, and their invasion thwarted. Jack and Lyra had played pivotal roles in this triumph, but now, as the battle came to an end, they both knew that their journey was far from over. Jack stood near the remnants of the base, his armor battered and scratched from the fight. His breath was heavy, his body aching from the intensity of the battle. But despite the exhaustion, there was a sense of peace settling in. They had done it. They had won. Lyra, standing beside him, looked out over the battlefield, her gaze distant. Her exoskeleton was now fully functional again, its sleek design gleaming in the fading light. It was clear that she had regained her strength, both physically and mentally. She had been through so much: hurt, fear, and loss. But now, there was a sense of resolution in her eyes. She had fought for her survival and for humanity's future, and now she was ready to move on. "Thank you, Jack," Lyra said, her voice soft but filled with gratitude. "I never thought I'd make it out of here alive. But you saved me." Jack looked at her, his heart swelling with emotion. He had never expected to become so deeply connected with someone from another world. But Lyra had changed everything. She had become more than just a mission. She had become someone he cared for, someone he couldn't bear to lose. He had fought for her, and in doing so, he had found something he hadn't even realized he was searching for, a purpose beyond the battlefield. "You didn't need saving, Lyra," Jack replied, his voice steady despite the emotions swirling inside him. "You're stronger than you think. You fought your way through this, just like I did. We're in this together." Lyra's eyes softened as she gazed at Jack. There was a moment of silence between them, but it wasn't uncomfortable. It was filled with understanding, shared experiences, and something deeper, something unspoken. As the hours passed, the reality of their victory began to sink in. The remnants of the alien forces were being cleaned up, and the human soldiers who had survived the battle were beginning to gather for a debriefing. But for Jack and Lyra, there was no rush to join the others. For the first time since they had met, they had time to simply be with each other, away from the chaos and destruction that had defined their lives for so long. "I think it's time for me to find a new purpose," Lyra said after a while, her voice thoughtful. "My people, they need a new direction. I can't stay here forever, but I need to help them rebuild. Maybe I can guide them toward peace." Jack nodded, understanding the weight of her words. He knew that Lyra had lost so much, her home, her family, her entire way of life. Now she was faced with the responsibility of leading her people toward a better future. It wouldn't be easy, but Jack knew that Lyra was capable of it. She was a warrior, but more than that, she was a leader. And perhaps that was her true calling. "You'll do great, Lyra," Jack said with a reassuring smile. "Your people are lucky to have you." Lyra smiled back, but there was a hint of sadness in her eyes. "I hope so, but I'll never forget the humans who fought by my side. And especially you, Jack. You're my hero." Jack's heart skipped a beat at her words. Hero. It was a word he had never thought of himself as. He had always been just a soldier, trained to follow orders, to fight, to survive. But now, with Lyra's words, he realized that perhaps he had become something more. He had become the person who fought not just for victory, but for those he cared about. "I'm no hero, Lyra," Jack said with a chuckle, trying to brush off the compliment. "I just did what needed to be done." But Lyra shook her head, her expression serious. "No, Jack. You didn't just save me. You gave me hope. You gave me something to fight for. You made me believe that there was still a chance for my people, and for us, together." Jack felt a lump form in his throat. The weight of Lyra's words settled on him, and for the first time in a long time, he felt truly understood. He had always thought that his mission was about defeating the enemy, about completing the mission. But now he realized that there was something far more important: connection. The bond between him and Lyra had been forged through fire, and it was unbreakable. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The world around them seemed to fade away as they stood there, together, in the quiet aftermath of the battle. It was a peaceful moment, a moment where they could simply be themselves, without the weight of the war or the expectations of others pressing down on them. And then, without thinking, Jack reached out and gently cupped Lyra's face in his hands. Her eyes widened slightly in surprise, but she didn't pull away. Instead, she closed her eyes, allowing herself to relax into his touch. For a brief moment, they simply stood there, their foreheads resting together, sharing an unspoken understanding. "I don't know what the future holds," Jack whispered, his voice low and sincere. "But I know one thing. I want to be with you, Lyra, wherever that takes us." Lyra's heart fluttered in her chest at his words. She had never thought she would find something like this, something real and beautiful, in the middle of a war. But Jack had shown her that even in the darkest of times, love could still bloom. She looked up at him, her eyes filled with emotion. "I want that too, Jack, more than anything." And in that moment, amidst the ruins of the battle, Jack and Lyra shared a kiss that was both a promise and a beginning. A promise that no matter what the future held, they would face it together. And a beginning of something new, something hopeful, in a universe that had once seemed so uncertain. The war had ended. The alien forces had been defeated. Humanity had won. But for Jack and Lyra, this was only the beginning. They had a future to build, one where love, hope, and a shared purpose would guide them forward. As they pulled away from each other, Jack smiled softly. "We've got a lot of work ahead of us, but we'll do it together." Lyra nodded, her heart full. "Together," she agreed. And so, with the battle behind them, and the promise of a new beginning ahead, Jack and Lyra stepped into the future side by side, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead, knowing that they were stronger together than apart. The world might have been at war, but they had found something worth fighting for, and they would never let it go.